For months, humans had whispered, sabotaged, and ambushed in the shadows. Small cells struck independently, their actions scattered and unpredictable. But now, guided by scraps of intelligence, stolen tech, and word of mouth, Elias Rourke's network attempted something unprecedented: a coordinated strike across multiple cities at the same moment. Chicago, Detroit, New Orleans, and the Appalachian enclaves would all move together, a single pulse of human defiance that would cut through the Dominion's harmony. In Chicago, Rourke stood in the hidden chamber beneath the slag yards, maps spread across tables. Myra Cade adjusted the alien relay, its pulse synchronized to mimic a heartbeat, a rhythm that could cloak multiple cells at once. "Are you sure this will work?" Jalen asked, fingers twitching over a row of rifles. Myra did not look up. "It will. If we synchronize the pulse with the local cell's movements, the Overseer's senses will lag by seconds, enough to strike, then vanish." Marin Vex added, her voice hard and commanding, "We move at midnight. Detroit hits the rail yards. New Orleans hits the canals. Appalachia collapses the mining shafts. If we succeed, the Dominion will know they are not omnipotent, but they will not know how to stop us." Rourke nodded. "Then we light the fuse. Every cell has been briefed, every weapon distributed. Tonight, humanity bleeds as one." The city streets were quiet under the smog-heavy sky. By midnight, teams of humans slithered from the tunnels, shadows among shadows. Chicago's first strike team moved toward the Central Overseer processing plant, rifles and knives ready. Sparks from hidden furnaces illuminated their path as they climbed walls and crossed rooftops. Detroit's cell hit the rail yards, cutting the fuel lines to Dominion vehicles. Bolts of fire consumed the transport engines, flames rising higher than the skeletal tracks, sending overseers fleeing into the night. In New Orleans, fishermen-turned-fighters triggered underwater nets of spikes, dragging several overseers into the murky waters. Their shrieks echoed, muffled by the swamp, but the message was clear: humans were striking. In Appalachia, miners detonated carefully rigged explosives in abandoned shafts. The ground shook, trapping overseers and cutting off Dominion patrols from surrounding valleys. All over the continent, the pulse of the relay synchronized the attacks. Overseers were blind, their senses tricked. Shots tore through patrols. Flames licked at supply depots. Workers broke chains and fled into the tunnels, guided by leaders who had once been broken. The strikes were surgical, efficient, and terrifying in their coordination. Rourke watched from the chamber as reports flickered in, couriers and smugglers carrying intelligence of each success. The human map lit up in patches of fire, cities and enclaves striking in rhythm. Myra's hands shook as she maintained the relay. "We are pushing it too far," she murmured. "If the network fails, if one cell is exposed, then we die trying," Rourke said, "and at least we will die as free people." By dawn, the results were undeniable. Overseers lay in ruined streets. Supplies were destroyed. Entire patrols had vanished in smoke and fire. Human cells had disappeared into tunnels before the Dominion could retaliate. And above it all, the harmony, so long an omnipresent drum, shivered with disruption. For the first time, the Dominion had felt real fear, and humanity had felt real power. Rourke looked at the faces of his team, Myra exhausted but alive, Jalen grinning despite cuts across his cheek, Marin Vex, arms crossed, a predator's satisfaction in her eyes. Around them, the tunnels hummed with whispered triumphs from other cells. The rebellion had become more than a spark. It was a pulse, beating through the continent. And for the first time, the humans dared to imagine victory. The Veya did not forgive. When the first coordinated strikes reached their ears, the Dominion's reaction was swift and merciless. Overseer patrols were doubled, then tripled. Orbital fleets drifted over every major city, their translucent hulls pulsing with green veins of energy, casting the world below in an oppressive light. Cities that had seen sparks of rebellion were bathed in a psychic hammer, harmony intensified, a rhythm so heavy it pressed thoughts from the human mind, leaving only fear and confusion. But the humans had learned. Rourke's cell received the first warning at dawn. Couriers arrived from Detroit, New Orleans, Appalachia, each carrying grim news. The Dominion had destroyed supply depots in smaller towns, burned workers alive as warnings, and tightened the Harmony's pulse to nearly unbearable levels. Entire human cells had been wiped out where they had been careless. Myra staggered into the chamber, pale and trembling. "They know it was coordinated," she whispered. "The Harmony, it's changing. Their psychic network is recalibrating." "If we strike again too soon, then we strike smarter," Rourke said. His voice carried the weight of authority he had reclaimed. "We cannot retreat. We cannot hide forever. If we falter now, everything dies. But if we move with precision, we can survive and we can grow." Marin Vex slammed her fist against the table. "We will not let them erase us. Every patrol we lost, every comrade they killed, they made the mistake of thinking we would cower. We will answer them with fire." Jalen's grin was manic, almost desperate. "Then let's burn the sky." The first Dominion retaliation hit Chicago just before dusk. Orbital surveillance ships glowed overhead, scanning every street, every rooftop. The Harmony pulsed with violent rhythm, forcing even the strongest recruits to their knees. Drone squads and reinforced overseers flooded the streets, moving systematically to flush humans from tunnels and safe houses. Rourke's team moved through the shadows, the stolen relay humming, masking their presence just enough to avoid detection. But for every successful strike, the Dominion had adapted. Patrols were larger, faster, and more attuned to the faintest disturbances. A firefight erupted in a narrow alley. Bolts of green plasma streaked through smoke and fog, searing walls and scattering rubble. Rourke fired from cover, dragging recruits behind him. Myra struggled to maintain the relay as its coils burned hot from overuse. One bolt struck near Jalen, sending him sprawling. He laughed through the pain, firing back with reckless abandon, tearing down another overseer. "They think they can scare us," he shouted. "They are just sharpening our teeth." Marin blocked a bolt with a metal rod, deflecting it into a cluster of advancing overseers. "We are not prey," she growled. "We are predators." By nightfall, the streets ran with fire and blood. Rourke's cell had survived, but the cost was high. Safe houses were destroyed, recruits were wounded, and everywhere they turned, the Dominion's presence was heavier, more calculated. In the hidden chamber, the team regrouped. Myra's hands shook as she inspected the relay. "We cannot keep pushing like this. The Dominion will adapt faster than we can. Soon they will have countermeasures that the relay cannot mask." Rourke stood silent for a long moment, staring at the tunnels leading into the city. "Then we will adapt faster. We will grow stronger. Every loss, every strike, every human who joins us, these are not failures. They are lessons, and lessons are weapons." Marin nodded grimly. "Then we fight smarter, we fight together. And we remind them, humans are never silent for long." The relay hummed in agreement, masking their presence in the tunnels as the city above burned. Outside, the orbital fleets glimmered, a silent threat in the smog-choked sky. But beneath the streets, humanity's pulse had grown too strong to ignore, and Elias Rourke knew that the war for Earth had only just begun. The world had grown small beneath the Dominion's gaze. Earth's major cities were glowing nodes in a network of oppression. Orbital fleets drifted like vultures above them, and overseers patrolled every ruined street. The Harmony pressed constantly, a psychic weight that dulled thought and sapped the soul. But the fire had spread. Rourke convened his leaders in the tunnels beneath Chicago. Maps sprawled across tables, each one annotated with marks of rebellion. Cities, rail depots, orbital relays, supply depots, even coastal ports. Human cells had formed in secret. Detroit, New Orleans, Appalachia, St. Louis, Houston, and distant nodes in Europe and Asia where the Dominion maintained outposts. "Every cell must strike in unison," Rourke said, his voice carrying authority that silenced the murmurs. "We cannot simply hit one target at a time. We hit multiple fleets, supply lines, and overseer stations simultaneously. Chaos is our ally." Mira tapped the alien relay, now augmented with multiple human power cells. "The masking pulse can extend across multiple cells, but only briefly. Timing must be perfect. One mistake and an entire city could fall. Jalen grinned, pacing the chamber. Perfect? I like perfect or nearly perfect. Mostly it's fun. Marin Vex slammed her fist onto the table. Fun is for the dead. Precision is survival. We coordinate, we strike, and we vanish. Rourke nodded. Then we begin. Each team knows its target. Each target is critical. Today, the Dominion learns that humanity is no longer scattered whispers in the dark. We are a hammer. The first synchronized strikes were brutal and efficient. In Chicago, human cells sabotaged the Central Overseer Supply Depot. Explosions tore through the reinforced walls, fire licking the skies as stolen rifles shredded patrols. In Detroit, rebels infiltrated the rail yards and disabled fuel lines, igniting transports bound for orbital fleets. Bolts of stolen Dominion plasma tore through guards, and the relay masked their presence until they vanished into the tunnels. New Orleans flooded with action as human cells rigged the canals with hidden explosives. Overlord patrols fell into traps, dragged into water where blades and fire awaited. Across Appalachia, miners collapsed shafts, burying entire Overseer patrols. Supplies meant for distant outposts were lost forever. Even across oceans, humans struck. In the remnants of London, a small cell disabled orbital communications and sabotaged a Dominion weapons shipment. In the ruins of Tokyo, a network of former engineers detonated fuel reserves aboard overseer ships docked at coastal ports. The strikes were small in scale, but devastating in effect, the first taste of humanity's global defiance. The Dominion was forced to react. Orbital fleets shifted. Orbital relays emitted higher intensity pulses to compensate for the masking devices, and overseer reinforcements poured into cities previously untouched. Entire sectors of Earth were isolated, communications jammed, and the harmony intensified to unbearable levels. Yet for every reaction, Rourke's network adapted. Back in Chicago, Rourke watched reports trickle in from couriers and scout cells. Every successful strike reinforced another. Recruits multiplied. Cells began to share tactics, weapons, and knowledge. What had begun as isolated sparks became an interconnected pulse of rebellion spanning continents. Myra's hands trembled as she monitored the relay. "They are trying to counter the masking," she said. "If they break through, they will not," Rourke said. His voice was steel. "We adapt faster. We are learning at the speed they cannot match. Every attack, every loss, every victory strengthens us. The more they strike, the more humans awaken." Jalen laughed, waving a rifle over his head. "And the more fun it becomes," Marin Vex gave a hard smile. "Do not mistake joy for carelessness. The Dominion will not stop. We will either win or die." Rourke looked at each of them, his chest tight with the weight of responsibility and the surge of hope. "Then we fight, not for scraps of life, not for hidden corners of the earth, but for freedom, for every human they have broken, for every cell that still dares to breathe." The relay pulsed, masking the spread of rebellion across the continent, and for the first time, the human pulse had become unstoppable. The war had truly begun. The Dominion struck like a storm. After weeks of scattered defeats, the Veya had learned. Orbital fleets darkened skies over key cities, pulse hammers rippling across the ground in psychic shocks. Overseer battalions, each clad in reinforced chitin and armed with devastating plasma rifles, poured into the streets, their numbers overwhelming. Entire districts were cordoned off, factories and tunnels sealed. The harmony no longer merely pressed against the human mind, it shredded it. Thoughts became fragmented, fear clawing at every corner. Many fled underground not in hope, but in terror. In Chicago, Elias Rourke's command chamber was alive with urgency. Maps and reports littered the floor, candles flickering over scribbled notes. Myra Cade adjusted the augmented relay, her fingers shaking from exhaustion. "The masking will not hold long," she said, voice strained. "The Veya have synchronized their pulses across sectors. If we do not move now, the cells outside the city will be slaughtered." Marin Vex slammed a fist on the table. "Then we fight. Every recruit, every rifle, every improvised weapon we can muster, we strike before they crush us all. Jalen grinned, bloodied from a skirmish earlier that morning. Finally, real fun. Rourke raised a hand, silencing them. His eyes scanned the network of maps. We do not just fight, we survive. We protect the cells. We hit strategic points, communications, supply depots, orbital relay nodes. Every attack must weaken them and save our people. Mira nodded, teeth clenched. I can extend the masking, but only for minutes at a time. We need perfect timing. Rourke leaned over the map. Then we move at first pulse. Synchronize every strike. Every human alive becomes a weapon. Every overlord patrol they try to send is a liability for them. We make them bleed. The first wave hit just before dawn. From Chicago's tunnels, strike teams flooded the streets, masked by the relay's pulse. They struck supply depots, dismantled communication towers, and set fire to overseer fortifications. Explosions ripped through the air, plasma bolts shredding walls as humans darted from shadow to shadow. Detroit's cell sabotaged the orbital relay, causing a cascade of failures in the Veya's fleet coordination. Ships overhead rocked violently, their sensors blind to the rebels moving in the streets below. New Orleans, guerrillas struck simultaneously, detonating hidden explosives in the canals and ambushing reinforcements sent from Chicago. Appalachia's miners collapsed key supply shafts, cutting the Dominion off from critical resources. But the Dominion had adapted again. Orbital shockwaves hammered the ground, tearing streets apart and forcing civilians to flee. Elite overseer battalions moved in coordinated formations, psychic enforcers probing minds with brutal precision. Many human cells were caught off guard, forced to retreat under heavy fire. Rourke's team fought through the chaos, every step a desperate measure. Myra's relay hummed violently, masking them from detection just long enough to strike and vanish. Jalen's rifle tore through advancing overseers, plasma bolts searing chitin. Marin Vex blocked a psychic probe, her mind steel against the Dominion's mental intrusion. Even with the losses, the humans endured. They pulled their wounded into tunnels, abandoned supply depots, and shadowed alleys. The coordinated strikes had inflicted damage beyond the Dominion's calculations, lost supplies, disrupted fleets, and the first significant psychic instability in harmony sectors across multiple cities. By nightfall, the aftermath was clear. Cities smoldered. Entire districts bore the scars of battle. The Dominion had retaliated, but never with the efficiency they expected. Human cells had survived, regrouped, and vanished before being annihilated. Rourke surveyed the tunnels, battered but alive, his team around him. Myra wiped sweat and blood from her brow, hands trembling. Jalen laughed shakily, arms draped over wounded comrades. Marin's expression was grim but fierce with triumph. Rourke spoke, voice low but unyielding. We were pressed, we were hunted. And yet we survived. This is the first time in decades that the Dominion has known fear, and they will know it again, and again, and again, until humanity takes back what is ours. Mira's relay pulsed softly, a faint echo of a heartbeat in the tunnels. The network had been stretched to its limits, but it had held. The ember had become a blaze, and the fire of rebellion now burned across continents. The sky was no longer the limit. The Dominion's orbital fleets had long watched over Earth, vessels humming with lethal energy, each one a floating fortress of the Veya's will. For decades, humans had cowered beneath them, their cities lit by the cold glow of alien patrols. But now, humanity was awake. Elias Rourke stood on the roof of a ruined high-rise in Chicago, gazing upward. The orbital fleet shimmered against the night sky, green veins pulsing with lethal rhythm. Each ship was a symbol of the Dominion's might, but also a target. Myra Cade adjusted the augmented relay at her side. We can mask a single boarding team, she said, voice tight. But the orbital defenses are more sophisticated. Shields, kinetic interceptors, and psychic sentinels. Any misstep and then we do not misstep, Rourke said. His eyes swept over the scattered recruits behind him, the newest cells that had joined the rebellion in the past months. We have trained, we have fought, and we have survived impossible odds. Now we strike above the city, not just beneath it." Marin Vex smirked, a predator's smile. Finally, something worth fighting for. Jalen brandished a stolen plasma rifle, grin wild. "Let's give them fireworks they'll never forget." The operation was audacious. A commandeered orbital shuttle, smuggled past Dominion detection with the help of newly liberated orbital engineers, waited hidden in a ruined docking station. A single boarding team, masked by Myra's pulse, would infiltrate a Dominion supply ship hovering above Chicago, neutralize its garrison, and turn its weapons against other vessels. Rourke led the team, every step calculated. Myra's relay pulsed in rhythm with the shuttle's systems, cloaking them from psychic detection. Jalen's rifle hummed at his side, and Marin's squad carried explosives designed to breach bulkheads with surgical precision. The shuttle breached orbit. Green light washed over them as Dominion sensors flared. Myra's pulse masked them just enough for the boarding hatch to latch onto the supply vessel undetected. Rourke's hand tightened on the hatch release. "On my mark," he whispered. 3, 2, 1. The boarding clamps latched, and the hatch opened silently. Inside, the supply ship was a cathedral of Dominion technology, storage bays humming with fuel cells, weapons, and intelligence arrays. Overseers patrolled methodically, unaware of the intruders masked by the relay. Rourke's team moved like shadows. Bolts of plasma were fired sparingly, eliminating patrols with surgical precision. Explosives were planted at key points, ready to turn the ship into a weapon. Then disaster struck. A psychic sentinel detected a faint anomaly. Alarms blared. The ship shook violently as Dominion forces converged. Bolts of energy-seared corridors, and the masking pulse wavered. "Now or never," Rourke shouted. The team split. Jalen and Marin secured the weapons bays, while Rourke and Myra accessed the navigation and communications nodes. Explosives were armed, plasma rifles firing at every advancing overseer. The first blasts rocked the ship, tearing through hull sections. Fuel cells ignited, sending streaks of green fire into the void. Communications systems overloaded, broadcasting false signals to nearby Dominion vessels. The shuttle pilot, a liberated human engineer, guided the vessel into a calculated collision course. As the supply ship erupted in fire and energy, other Dominion vessels misread the signals and scattered, leaving orbital nodes vulnerable. By the time the team returned to Chicago, orbital defenses were reeling. For the first time, humans had struck from above and survived. Rourke looked at the stars, the green glow of the surviving Dominion ships flickering like distant ghosts. This war is no longer about hiding. It is about taking the fight to them, wherever they are. Earth is just the beginning. Mira's hands trembled on the relay, exhausted but alive. "We have done the impossible." Jalen laughed, voice raw with exhilaration. "Impossible is my favorite." Marin's eyes burned. "This is just the start. The Dominion will retaliate, and when they do, we will be ready." Rourke nodded. The ember in his chest was no longer contained. It was ablaze, consuming the silence that had bound humanity for centuries. From the ruins of Earth to the void above, the rebellion had begun its true war. The sky was no longer safe. In the aftermath of the orbital raid, the Dominion unleashed their fury. Entire fleets descended on Earth, shields blazing, kinetic cannons tearing through the atmosphere. Psychic shockwaves rippled through cities, crushing minds, bending the will of the terrified populace. But humanity had learned. Elias Rourke stood on the bridge of a commandeered orbital station, his eyes fixed on the incoming fleet. The station had been retrofitted by liberated engineers, armed with stolen Dominion weapons, reinforced with scavenged alloys, and masked by Myracade's augmented relay. "Numbers are overwhelming," Myra warned, voice tight. "They have more vessels than we've ever seen. And the harmony is unbearable. Their psychic assault is focused on our command nodes. If it breaks through, then we break them first," Rourke said, cutting her off. His hand rested on the control console, eyes sweeping over the holographic display of the fleet. "We have one advantage. They do not expect humans to fight like this. They expect submission. They expect fear. They will not expect coordinated multi-orbit strikes. Jalen twirled a plasma rifle, grin wild. Perfect. Let's shock the gods of the sky. Marin Vex's gaze was hard as steel. Precision and fire. Remember, every weapon, every pilot, every explosive must count. One mistake and the Dominion will annihilate us before we blink. The first wave of attacks began. From retrofitted orbital shuttles, human boarding teams struck Dominion carriers, disabling weapon arrays and detonating fuel cells. Explosions lit the void, fire licking against the blackness. Coordinated fire from commandeered stations shredded patrol vessels, their shields unable to compensate for simultaneous assaults across multiple nodes. Humans moved with uncanny efficiency, masking their presence just long enough to strike and vanish. In Earth orbit, orbital bombardments targeted Dominion installations, severing supply lines and communication arrays. Civilian populations below were spared where possible. Humans had learned the value of precision after years of brutality, but the message was clear. The rebellion now fought in space. The Dominion adapted swiftly. Elite overseer squadrons deployed, kinetic interceptors tore into human vessels, and psychic enforcers targeted command nodes with lethal precision. One strike destroyed a shuttle carrying key recruits, the psychic scream echoing through the station. Another carrier fired on Chicago, leveling entire districts in warning, but Rurk's network endured. Cells coordinated attacks via secure, masked relays. Boarding teams moved in unpredictable patterns. Explosives detonated at critical moments. Ships maneuvered with reckless ingenuity, exploiting gaps in Dominion protocols. Every strike, every counter, every near loss strengthened humanity's tactical knowledge. By the end of the first orbital battle, humanity had achieved what no one believed possible. Several Dominion vessels were destroyed or disabled. Key orbital nodes fell under human control. Supply chains were severed. The harmony, once absolute, was fractured across sectors, leaving overseers struggling to maintain psychic dominance. Rurk watched the results, exhaustion and exhilaration mingling in his chest. Myra's hands trembled over the relay, stabilizing the masking field. Jalen laughed, leaning against a console, scars across his cheek from earlier boarding fights. Marin Vex's eyes blazed with triumph, surveying the fleet like a predator marking territory. Rurk's voice was calm but deadly. The Dominion has learned to fear us, and this is only the beginning. Above them, the void still shimmered with Dominion vessels, but the humans had tasted victory. Earth was no longer merely a battlefield, it was a springboard. The rebellion had gone beyond the planet, and humanity's war for freedom now stretched across the stars. The rebellion had become a storm. After their first orbital victories, humans were no longer confined to Earth. News of the raids had reached colonies across the Dominion-controlled systems, mining stations in Mars orbit, research outposts near Jupiter's moons, and even distant settlements in the outer asteroid belts. The enslaved populations, long broken by psychic domination and fear, were awakening. Small resistance cells had formed independently, but now they reached out to Rurk's network. Maps once limited to Earth now span light years, marking outposts, fleets, and orbital facilities ripe for sabotage. Elias Rurk stood on the bridge of the Liberator, the largest commandeered human vessel in orbit around Earth. Its hull was scarred, patched with scavenged alloys, but it gleamed with stolen firepower. Around him, a council of humans, engineers, tacticians, and former slaves analyzed star charts and Dominion fleet movements. Myra Cade's fingers danced across the augmented relay, now integrated into multiple vessels. "We can mask coordinated strikes across the inner system," she said. "But beyond Mars, the pulse weakens. We'll need local teams to synchronize attacks or risk exposure." Jalen leaned against a console, plasma rifle slung across his back. "Perfect. That means more firefights, more explosions, more fun." Marin Vex's eyes were hard as steel. "Fun does not win wars. Strategy and precision do. Every misstep costs lives, and out here, mistakes are magnified across millions of kilometers. Rurk's gaze swept across the assembled leaders. Then we fight smart. Every cell, every ship, every weapon counts. Today we hit the outer colonies. We strike where the Dominion believes they are untouchable. Today, humanity bleeds in the stars. The first interstellar operation began near Mars. Small teams of human fighters infiltrated orbital refineries, sabotaging fuel lines and detonating critical infrastructure. Orbital defense drones were neutralized with stolen plasma rifles and hacking devices, while humans masked by the relay struck from hidden bays and service tunnels. At the same time, a fleet of commandeered vessels attacked Dominion supply convoys moving between Jupiter's moons. Explosions tore through transport hulls, sending fuel and cargo pods hurtling into space. Overseer reinforcements scrambled, but human maneuvers were unpredictable, hitting multiple points simultaneously and vanishing before retaliation could reach them. Even farther out, sabotage teams coordinated with remote asteroid colonies. They disrupted communication relays, diverted supply shipments, and destroyed orbital docks used by the Dominion's fleet. Each success inspired uprisings on other stations, spreading the rebellion like wildfire across the inner solar system. Yet the Dominion was not idle. Orbital fleets responded with overwhelming force. Elite overseer squadrons, reinforced with psychic enforcers, launched counteroffensives. Pulse hammers and kinetic barrages targeted human outposts. In several skirmishes, boarding parties attempted to retake commandeered stations, forcing humanity to fight on multiple fronts at once. Rurk's strategy, however, was evolving. Using intelligence gathered from liberated engineers and captured overseer vessels, humans set traps in advance, ambushing enemy fleets along predictable supply routes. Masked vessels struck from unexpected vectors, and boarding teams neutralized key weapons before the Dominion could respond. Myra's relay became a backbone of the network, linking vessels and ground teams across hundreds of kilometers, masking their movements from psychic detection just long enough to execute coordinated strikes. By the end of the first interstellar campaign, the humans had achieved something remarkable. Several outer colonies were liberated, Dominion supply lines were crippled, and orbital fleets were destabilized. Humanity had not only survived, they had conquered space in ways the Veya never anticipated. Rurk stood on the bridge, looking at the stars. Around him, his leaders were battered, exhausted, but triumphant. "We've struck across systems," he said, voice low but unwavering. "They thought humans would bow under the harmony, under the fleets, under centuries of oppression. They were wrong. Every colony we liberate, every fleet we disable, every human who rises against them strengthens us, strengthens hope." Mira's hands hovered over the relay, pulse steady. "They will retaliate, stronger, faster, smarter." Jalen laughed, voice raw. "Then we hit them again, and again, and again, until they bleed as much as we do." Marin Vex's eyes gleamed. "And when they strike, we will be ready. This war is ours to win or ours to die fighting." Rurk's gaze drifted to the dark void beyond the hull. Ships glimmered against the black Dominion vessels, still scattered, still dangerous, but no longer invincible. "Humanity has crossed the stars," he said, "and we will not stop until every last overseer knows fear." The Veya were furious. The coordinated strikes across the inner solar system had shattered their sense of control. Orbital supply lines lay in ruins, colonies rebelled, and their fleets were scattered. No longer did humans cower beneath the harmony, they struck with audacity, precision, and speed. The Dominion would respond with everything they had. Elias Rurk stood on the bridge of the Liberator, its hull scarred from months of orbital skirmishes. Surrounding him, dozens of human vessels, commandeered freighters, retrofitted shuttles, and stealth fighters, formed the nucleus of a fleet never imagined by the Dominion. Myracade's hands danced over the augmented relay, now scaled to link dozens of ships simultaneously. "They've assembled a massive fleet," she warned. "Hundreds of ships, including heavy cruisers and carriers. Their psychic nodes are concentrated. If they strike in unison, then we strike first, Rourke said, eyes hard. We've adapted before. We will adapt again. Every colony we've liberated feeds intelligence into this battle. Every success has sharpened our tactics. Marin Vex gripped the rail of the bridge, eyes scanning the holomap. We fight as one. Fleet coordination, boarding teams, orbital assaults. Nothing is accidental. Every human alive is a weapon. Jalen brandished a plasma rifle, grin wide. Finally, a real fight. The Dominion fleet emerged from the void, hulking vessels casting green light across the inner solar system. Psychers projected waves of psychic force, attempting to destabilize human command nodes. Kinetic cannons slashed through space, tearing apart isolated vessels before they could form a line. Rourke's fleet moved in a precise formation, masking its presence with the relay's pulses. Humans struck with speed, hitting weak points in the Dominion formation. Boarding teams deployed on enemy vessels, disabling weapons, sabotaging engines, and detonating fuel cells. The battle erupted into chaos. Plasma bolts streaked across space, colliding with shields that shimmered and fractured under human ingenuity. Boarding parties fought hand-to-hand in the void, reinforced armor clashing against stolen human weapons. Explosions rocked vessels, sending debris spinning into the darkness. Myra's relay hummed violently, sustaining masking fields that allowed human fighters to move undetected long enough to strike. Jalen's small strike squad tore through an overseer cruiser, detonating a cascade of fuel cells that ignited the void in a green inferno. Marin Vex led a boarding assault on a Dominion carrier, her squad neutralizing psychic enforcers and turning the vessel's weapons against the fleet. Even as humans achieved victories, the Dominion's retaliation was brutal. Heavy cruisers fired volleys into the human lines, vaporizing shuttles. Psychic nodes blasted command hubs, threatening to overwhelm masked vessels. Dozens of humans were lost in the opening hours, their screams echoing through the hulls of surviving ships. Yet humanity endured. Rourke coordinated counterattacks, exploiting weaknesses revealed by the Dominion's predictable formations. Each strike was surgical, every loss compensated by overwhelming tenacity. Outer colonies supplied reinforcements and intelligence, creating a network of human resistance spanning hundreds of millions of kilometers. By the battle's end, the first full-scale interstellar engagement had concluded, not with total victory, but with unprecedented impact. Dominion fleets were fractured. Several carriers destroyed, supply lines disrupted, and orbital control over key colonies weakened. Human forces had taken casualties, but the cost to the Dominion was far greater. Rourke watched the holomap, exhausted but alive. Myra adjusted the relay, stabilizing the masking fields. Jalen's laughter was raw with adrenaline and relief. Marin Vex's gaze remained sharp, calculating the next moves. Rourke spoke, voice low but unwavering. We have survived the impossible. We have struck across the stars, and we have shown them something they never expected. Humans do not bow, do not submit, and will not be silenced. Not on Earth, not in orbit, not anywhere in the Dominion's reach. Mira nodded. They will strike back harder. Then we strike harder still, Rourke said. His eyes drifted to the dark void beyond the fleet, at the Dominion ships retreating, shattered but not gone. This war is far from over, but we have won the first battle of freedom, and that victory will ignite every human soul across the stars. The Liberator and its fleet moved silently through the debris-littered void, a pulse of defiance against a Dominion that had never known fear. Humanity's war for the stars had truly begun. The Dominion's patience had ended. The scattered defeats in the inner solar system had humiliated them, and the Veya would not tolerate it again. Entire fleets were mobilized, leaving nothing to chance. Orbital dreadnoughts bristled with plasma cannons, psychic enforcers reinforced every command node, and planetary bombardments were prepared to erase any human presence from Mars, Earth, and the outer colonies. This was no longer a war of skirmishes. This was total annihilation. Elias Rourke stood on the bridge of the Liberator, his fleet arrayed like a fragile web across the inner system. Reports flooded in from every liberated colony. Dominion fleets were advancing in synchronized waves, orbital defenses had been recalibrated, and psychic nodes were actively probing for resistance networks. Myra Cade's hands trembled as she manipulated the augmented relay. They're coordinating across the entire system. Our masking will hold only briefly, and they're targeting our command vessels first. If they succeed, they will not succeed, Rourke said, voice steady, eyes scanning the tactical maps. We've faced worse. We've survived impossible odds. We fight smarter, faster, and together. Every colony, every vessel, every human is a weapon now. Marin Vex slammed her fist against the console. Then we hit them where it hurts. Their supply lines, their command nodes, their fleets, destroy them before they can crush us. We will not flee. Jalen laughed, though the sound was edged with tension. Finally, a real war. The Dominion's offensive began with overwhelming precision. Massive dreadnoughts fired orbital bombardments at Mars and the inner colonies, leveling cities and supply depots. Swarms of interceptors hunted human shuttles, while psychic enforcers assaulted command nodes with brutal force. Human cells fought back with ingenuity. Rourke divided his fleet into multiple strike groups, each masked by Myra's pulse, moving unpredictably through the orbital battlefield. Boarding teams infiltrated Dominion carriers, sabotaging weapons and disabling engines. Stealth fighters struck supply convoys, igniting fuel reserves and severing communications. Even in the face of superior numbers, humanity's decentralized coordination gave them an edge. Every victory inspired uprisings on nearby colonies, further destabilizing the Dominion's advance. The battle reached its zenith near Jupiter. A massive Dominion fleet attempted to cut off human reinforcements from the outer colonies. The Liberator led the counterattack. Human ships darted between debris fields, launching boarding assaults on carriers and detonating fuel cells with precision. Psychic enforcers struck at the fleet's command nodes, threatening to fracture coordination, but Myra's relay pulsed at maximum output, shielding key vessels just long enough to maintain synchronized strikes. Explosions lit the void as carriers erupted in fire. Supply lines were severed. Overseers scrambled to regroup, but every move was anticipated. Humanity had learned, adapted, and evolved into a force the Veya had never imagined. By the end of the engagement, the Dominion had been forced to retreat. Planets and colonies still bore the scars of orbital bombardments, but the rebellion had survived. Supply chains disrupted, fleets fractured, and key psychic nodes destroyed. The Veya realized that humans were no longer a contained threat. They were a strategic nightmare. Rourke's fleet regrouped in the debris-strewn orbit above Jupiter. His crew was battered, exhausted, but alive. He looked at Myra, her hands still trembling over the relay. "We've held," he said. "They will strike again," she whispered. "Then we will strike back harder," Rourke said. "We've proven we can win against impossible odds. Now we expand. We unite every human cell across the system, and we will make them pay for every year, every world, every soul they tried to break." Marin Vex's eyes glowed with unyielding fire. "Then let them come. We fight, we survive, and we conquer." Jalen raised his plasma rifle with a grin. "To the stars, then, and beyond," Rourke nodded, gaze drifting toward the distant stars. The war was far from over, but humanity was no longer afraid. They had crossed the brink of survival into open rebellion, and the Dominion had learned at last that humanity could not be silenced. Across the solar system, lights flickered in the colonies. Systems stirred with defiance. The ember had become a wildfire, and now it would consume the stars. The stars themselves seemed to tremble. After years of silent oppression, decades of broken minds, and centuries of fear, humanity had risen. From the ruins of Earth to the outer colonies, from orbital shuttles to commandeered cruisers, the rebellion had grown into a force that spanned systems, a network of defiance the Dominion could neither predict nor contain. Elias Rourke stood on the bridge of the Liberator, flanked by Myra Cade, Marin Vex, and Jalen. Across the tactical holomap, the human fleet stretched like a living web across the inner solar system, now joined by liberated ships from Mars, the asteroid belt, and distant colonies beyond Jupiter. "The Dominion will make one final push," Myra said, voice low, eyes scanning the data streams. "They've concentrated fleets from 3 star systems, psychic nodes active across the entire inner system. They intend to crush us, and if they succeed, they will not succeed," Rourke said. His eyes burned with the certainty of years of struggle. "We've faced impossible odds before. We've adapted, evolved, and struck them where they never expected. Today, humanity ends the Dominion's reign over our stars." Marin Vex slammed a fist onto the console. "Then we make them bleed. Every ship, every node, every world. They will know fear for the first time in millennia." Jalen raised his plasma rifle, grin wide. "Finally, a war worth winning." The final offensive began in orbit above Mars. Coordinated strike teams infiltrated Dominion carriers, sabotaging psychic amplifiers and weapons arrays. Human vessels swarmed like predatory sharks, striking with surgical precision. Explosions erupted across orbital platforms, debris spinning in the void, masking the advance of other fleets. Myra's relay pulsed at maximum output, linking every fleet, every colony, every strike team into a single, synchronized assault. For the first time, humanity's full network moved as one organism, a living, breathing weapon. Dominion fleets scrambled, but they were outmaneuvered. Boarding teams seized key vessels, turning their weapons against allies. Psychic nodes were destroyed, depriving the Dominion of the Harmony's crushing influence. Outer colonies joined the fight, their ships forming a pincer that trapped major dreadnoughts in crossfire. Human ingenuity, coordination, and sheer determination overwhelmed the Veya at every turn. Ships that had once terrorized Earth now burned in the void. Supply lines severed, command nodes destroyed, fleets shattered. The Dominion had no place to retreat. The final confrontation occurred above Jupiter. A massive Veya dreadnought attempted to consolidate remaining forces, its psychic pulse radiating like a hammer. Rourke's fleet engaged it with everything they had. Boarding teams infiltrated the ship, planting explosives at critical nodes. Human vessels unleashed volleys of plasma, tearing through shields that had once seemed unassailable. Marin Vex led a boarding squad through the hull, fighting elite overseers in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Jalen's team detonated fuel cells that ripped the dreadnought apart from within. Myra synchronized the fleet's masking pulse to allow final coordinated strikes on retreating Dominion vessels. And then, in a blinding explosion, the dreadnought erupted, a green and orange fireball that illuminated the void. The remaining Dominion ships scattered, disorganized, and leaderless. Humanity's fleets pursued and captured what they could, turning the enemy's weapons against them. Silence followed the storm. For the first time in centuries, humans looked up at the stars without fear. Entire systems had been liberated. Colonies rejoiced as news of victory spread faster than any Dominion fleet could travel. Humanity had reclaimed not just Earth, but the solar system, and beyond, the seeds of interstellar freedom were sown. Rourke stood on the bridge of the Liberator, watching the stars. Myra's hands rested on the relay, steady now, humming softly with residual energy. Marin Vex leaned against the railing, eyes scanning the liberated fleet, a predator's satisfaction in her gaze. Jalen whistled softly, awe and relief mixing in his voice. Rourke spoke, calm but resolute. "The Dominion believed they could silence us forever. They believed the stars themselves belonged to them. They were wrong. Humanity is no longer silent. Humanity is free." The stars glittered like fire. Across planets, moons, and orbital stations, humans celebrated. Ships soared through the void, not as slaves, but as masters of their fate. And in the darkness beyond, the Veya had learned what countless generations of humans already knew. Once humanity ignites, No chains can contain it. The ember had become a blaze, and that blaze would never die.